Welcome to the Wolfe Power Club, the weekly podcast where we discuss energy, industry and politics. I'm your host Alex. I've sold and bought a few companies and also I've sold billions of litres. Join me on this journey to net zero. Download on Apple Podcasts. Season 1 brought to you by AIM Recruit, the leading recruiters in logistics, transport and energy at www.aimrecruit.com. So I appreciate there's two things left today, the big questions that are going to come next and obviously the networking drink. So I appreciate I'm the barrier to that. So we will have some fireworks in the next 10 minutes and really think of some good questions, and then I'll show you why in a second. So what are we going to cover today? We're going to cover who is the Wolfe Power Club podcast and why in 12 months time it's going to be in the top 5 podcasts on the energy sector and getting the messages from this room to a much wider audience. We also can get inspiration from Just Stop Oil. I appreciate they seem to only go to the horse racing and the tennis, and they don't seem to come to an energy show, which is a bit odd for me because actually people who can make a difference are here, and we'll go why. We'll look at the HGV sales today and actually where is the truth in what's going on with HGV. And the reality is it's been absolutely miserable when you look at electrification and hydrogen, and we'll go into the real numbers. You're going to be shocked. The next thing is we're going to look at the depreciation, the global challenge. So if anyone is commercial in the room, I'm going to look at the pound notes. Actually, what is happening in the financial side of it that actually means that there's stopping decision makers going to alternative technologies. I'm going to look at the hope of Hydrotreated Vegetable Oil. And then I'm going to look at what the Oil Market Journal has created for Hydrotreated Vegetable Oil, for it to be a world-class and well-debated product to sell. And then finally the government ask. Sorry, I'm absolutely full of hay fever, but we're going to bang on through. So a little bit about the Wolfe Power Club podcast. Ultimately, I'm the third generation of my family in energy. My grandfather was part of the interconnector, so we can trade energy between the UK and France. My father was a very successful nuclear engineer, and then I've had a career at director level across some of the biggest energy companies in the country, including Certus Energy, better known for Gulf Retail, but also senior roles at Shell and at Mabanaft. My other big love is tennis. So for the 3 very best questions today, you get a very branded set of tennis balls. So enjoy. So I really want some difficult questions. But essentially, why do we see the Venn diagram of the podcast? We see it in the 3 areas. 1, energy leaders have a message to tell, and I know how difficult it is to get it outside of this conference. The second, very fortunately, my wife worked at the European government for a long time, so I've had the unfortunate thing of having relationships with the last 5 prime ministers, but I want to get the big decision makers about the policies that are helping our funding streams or the way the world is going and bring that into the Venn diagram. And the other bit that I'm hugely passionate about is the energy investors and the OEMs, the manufacturers of the equipment, about where things. So if you think your company has a message to tell, come and contact us. We think there's some really good debates. We've got some very high profile politicians coming on. We've also got some board directors of the top 10 big energy companies, but there's more stories. And we've got some fun stuff, such as a racing fuel guy who can tell you how to go past 200 miles per hour with racing fuels. I was on court when Just Stop Oil ran on, and I was in an umpire capacity rather than doing the demonstration. It was a very British protest where they threw jigsaw pieces over the tennis court and brought it to a stop. But what was interesting is, one, I was chuckling to myself thinking, if you actually knew I was an oil director, I'm sure you would have had a lot more fun on court. And then the second bit that I was very interested in was actually Just Stop Oil, fundamentally, even for the protester, was a fundamental problem. Because the protester actually had a panic attack after that photo. And again, in a very British way, you had the umpires, the police officers feeding him water and an ambulance standing in by to take him to St George's Hospital. Now, just to give some energy numbers of what he needed, even as the Just Stop Oil person, his water bottle It's roughly about a quarter of the capacity of any water bottle is what's used in energy or oil. So actually to make a litre bottle of water, you're actually using 250 millilitres of fossil fuels. Next is the ambulance, currently running on diesel, the majority in London due to the various systems, they run off their things, uses about 500 litres a week. And then finally, being a protester, he wanted his image all across the world, on every TV channel, WhatsApp to all the people and downloaded. Data centres today take 1.3% of all energy use in the world. So when you are buying your Bitcoin, when you are WhatsApping your friend, you are still using energy, and yet Just Stop Oil add to the problem, not solve the problem. But in this room, we're going to solve the problem. So where are we with the HGV sector? Absolutely phenomenal year. So in 2023, it was the best year for 4 years. We sold 46,000 trucks. That was an increase on 30% trucks. Obviously, we all live lifestyles around the world where actually everything comes to our door by truck, whatever part of the world we're in. And yet when you come to the press or you come to shows, there's lots of passion about electric and hydrogen. So I'm interested, what did people guess was the hydrogen and electric truck sales out of that 46,000? Don't be nervous. 250. You guys are very close. Last year, I find the number really funny because it's this perfect number, 234 trucks that were either electric or hydrogen that were over 6 tons. So HGV is anything over 6 tons. So it's anything that's kind of bigger than you might get a Sainsbury's delivery from. Now what's interesting about that is that actually that's 0.5% of the sector. So that means that also the trucks that were sold just now are going to be roughly somewhere between 8 and 12 years, depending on the distributor. So let's take an average that a lot of those trucks will be into the early 2030s still of when they're being used. And we're going to look at why there's been such a struggle. But it's interesting when you see that 1 in 6 cars have gone electric. And ultimately, what we're saying is that the headlines are always about X, Y, Z fleet has just bought electric trucks. What it actually means is they've got 1,000 trucks that are diesel. They've bought 2 trucks that have been funded by the local council that are hydrogen or electric. I see no issue with that, but it's obviously not the solution that we're looking for. Now, why has it been so miserable? Now, it's been covered a lot at other sessions today, but I'm going to look at some of the financials. So the first one is the challenge on doing the job when you're looking at HGV. To give you an example, the average HGV in Britain will do about 600 miles per day. When you look at all the top electric market today, between charge times, it's around the 180 miles mark. So you can see the fundamental problem. You'd need 3 charge periods, and each charge period takes, in the depending what model truck, somewhere between an hour and 2 hours on fast charge, or 7 to 12 hours on AC charge. The other problem that you've got then is the actual physical weight. You can't have something over 44 tonnes on the British roads because it'll be illegal. And even with the electric, sometimes they give compensation. You can have a bit heavier. You don't sort the problem. The next bit is you don't have the repair shops around the country to do it. It's very interesting. A massive council in terms of Birmingham, even with their pro-energy stance, when they had a chance to choose fleet of hydrogen, electric or so on, they went back to diesel, and they're all done the last 12 months. That's one of the most pro-green councils in the country. The other problem is 50% of the value of an electric vehicle is in its battery, but that's huge problematic because I'll go on to a second in terms of the depreciation in terms of the rest of the world market. And then the other thing is, look at the competition. Liquid Fuels in the UK has 1,400 HGV lanes and 8,500 petrol stations. And the fill time at a specialised HGV site is 3 to 4 minutes versus that 2 hours to 8 hours. So you can see the fundamental problem that we're going to. The next problem is fuel is on a Platts model. It's very transparent. Essentially, people can trade with each other, and you can charge councils and they can charge on councils and haulage companies and they can pass it on. With electric still today, it's quite hit and miss about what the charge rate is, and in terms of getting a contracted, regulated price that covers your country, usage. And I used to run a massive fuel card company. We saw the challenges and the various stakeholders to bring unified contractor prices. So, what's then the depreciation problem that a lot of people not in finance or not in big fleet I think? So I've been used to ordering hundreds of trucks per year in various previous roles, and the problem is that there's no global market for non-liquid fuel vehicles. What's fascinating about HVO or other fuels that you put in, if it's a liquid fuel, it's very easy to adopt the infrastructure of various countries to liquid fuels to actually keep the same technology, and actually you only have to look at really spark plugs and valves in the engine. As soon as you're talking about a physically different engine, you can see it across the world. Now, I obviously, my wife likes traveling and I like energy, so I've combined it with a few stats that might blow your mind. In Canada, there's 86,000 Teslas, but there's 2.1 million diesel RVs for only 15 million households. So 1 in 7 households owns a diesel RV in Canada, but you can see that contrast of the passion behind liquid fuels. Then next down, you've got Mauritius, where their average age of their bus fleet is actually 35 years old because they adopted it from India and Sri Lanka, and it was lovely seeing the Ashok Leylands. And then finally at the bottom you've got this truck in Sao Tome that started its life 42 years ago in Essex and has had about 5 owners in between. And it was very funny finding its number plate because they hadn't changed it in Sao Tome, and being able to contact its former owner in Essex and having a bit of banter that it was now on the equator. But essentially what I'm saying is there's no aftermarket for a lot of these vehicles, or very small aftermarket, so the depreciation outweighs any government grants. Where's the HVO Hope? First of all, it does look like HVO reduces emissions of greenhouse gases by up to 90%, when actually DFT have run the figures and transport thing. The next bit is there's massive competition on HVO with the majority of liquid fuel providers, so you're probably looking at 20 plus now, bringing it to the UK. In the last year, 250 million litres has been sold to the UK market. The picture of the fuel site is myself in Southampton. That was the first ever HVO site opened in Britain for fuel card users over 2 years ago. And then also big environmental projects that have to use liquid fuels, such as the Sir David Attenborough, you guys might know the boat with another name, as actually my team, previous team, filled that up with 1.3 million litres of HVO over a weekend. So what's brilliant about liquid fuel and HVO like that is that actually the infrastructure's there. So when you look at the 3 scopes of carbon and you start taking into account the building, the change in infrastructure, the mineral mining and so on, liquid fuels, and I'm not saying it's always going to be HVO, and there can be an improvement. I do think that liquid fuels, if you want to change the world economy, and we talk about thousands of trucks, is the way forward. So the other problem HVO had was there was no recognised Platts equivalent market because the trades were so small. So I'm thanking my friends from OMJ who came up with this last year, and what they're now doing is taking the Argus Class 2 from essentially the cooking oil numbers, as we've already talked about today, the RTFO, we call it RTFCs when you then look at trading, a deduction of that to give the numbers. And what that means is, like Platts, you can then have a pricing mechanism that came live about 9 months ago to the whole market. What's interesting as well is if you look at the graph, at one point last year there was almost a 45p difference between HVO and diesel. But what's interesting is as of April this year, that gap is close to 10p with no change of technology. It's a drop in fuel, so essentially your route's the same, your logistics business is the same, and you can go forward. Now, the podcast will do this quite a lot, is ask a few asks. I was getting enraged today in some of the sessions, and apologies if you're a civil servant or government, but if I hear the words again, well, we rely on the private sector. Please be very clear. You had £24.8 billion of income, aka net profit. I appreciate you might have more demands than some private energy companies, but you are the richest energy company in Britain. Don't walk away from that, whichever colour of government comes in. So what I more would be saying is, well, how are you going to use it to encourage liquid fuels that go into the infrastructure that's today? Because essentially you are the most powerful energy company, and the other thing you're very powerful on is then the other scopes of procurement. If you are giving contracts to companies with big fleets, whether it's buses or waste things, you can change a whole geography in a city by you being the first mover and therefore the infrastructure comes in place. The second bit is that I would say that in terms of that use of infrastructure, that's the way we're going to get clean. And then I would finally say is that try and make tax digital, guys. We have a crazy thing in Britain with red and white fuels, that actually the cost to bring a liquid fuel into the market when you're doing the agriculture sector and you're doing the transport sector is double, because essentially we love dyeing our fuel. Nowhere else in the rest of Europe does. We do our VAT as digital, so please go digital. I'd also say is that if this can go forward, you can really make the contracts very clear. And finally, I'd say is that if you're an HGV customer, that essentially the costs are coming down and down, so that going liquid is a very quick way to hit your free scopes of carbon above anything else. And what's the future for me and the Power Club? Coming out this September, so please do go onto the website to get our newsletter and hear about when it's going live. And the other thing is that I also am passionate about energy. You know, I've built HVO stops, I've run trucks of hundreds of trucks and sold billions of litres. But I think right now, data is poor, and therefore I'm very happy to announce today, it's great to see some of my new colleagues and team members, that as of August, I'll be becoming Director of Energy at one of the biggest AI companies in the world. Blend is looking to do data right for your energy. So thank you very much to my colleagues at Blend. I look forward to debate and discussion and enjoy who will win the tennis balls. Thank you very much, guys.